Good afternoon if you're in Europe, and good evening, good morning if you're somewhere else in the world. Welcome to our webinar on dynamic pricing featuring Pricelabs. The webinar today, the focus is an introduction to dynamic pricing and its importance to the short-term rental market. I think most of us know it's a very hot topic, so I hope this is a really interesting and insightful session today. So just to introduce myself very quickly, I'm Andrew Martin. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Your.Rentals. And joining me today is Richie Kandawal. Richie, it's great to see you again. Could you just give a few words about yourself?
Likewise, Andrew. Hey, everyone. My name's Richie. I'm one of the co-founders at Pricelabs. We're going to get into Pricelabs a little bit, but I've been around in the industry for the last 10 years. Primarily had my vacation rental in US, and now I live in India.
Okay, so today, just to jump right in, we're going to give you a quick introduction to Pricelabs. What is it? I'm sure you've heard of Pricelabs if you're in the short-term rental industry. Then we're going to talk a bit about why dynamic pricing is essential in today's short-term rental business. And I know we've got a lot of hosts and property managers that have joined us, so I think that's going to be an interesting topic. We've recently released our integration with Pricelabs inside Your.Rentals, and I'm going to talk very quickly about that because there's not too much to explain. And we want to leave plenty of time at the end. We've got some prepared questions and answers that hosts and property managers are already asking us. But again, if you've got questions along the way, just put them in the Q&A and we'll come to those at the end. All right, so Richie, I'd love to get you to give us a run through of Pricelabs, where you started and what you do.
Absolutely. So we're a dynamic pricing platform, as I mentioned just a little bit while ago. We do dynamic pricing for a range of properties, right from short-term rentals, vacation rentals. You're thinking about those independent villas, independent homes, to mid-term rentals, 30-day stays, to serviced apartments. You're thinking about more like buildings, hotels, campgrounds. All of that should make sense. We've some awards that we have won along the way, but on the right-hand side also is just like we were founded in 2014. Today, we price a little over 400,000 properties. We just crossed 400,000 last month. We're customers in 100 plus countries. We speak 5 languages. Actually, we speak 6 now. We also have German team members. And then we're distributed around the world. Like I said earlier in the call, I'm personally based out of India. So yeah, so that's a quick brief about Pricelabs and who we are. Primarily a revenue management and pricing solution. Now, if we can jump to the next screen, just like in terms of like you're in good hands here. We work with, like I said, 400,000 properties. We work with a little over 48,000 customers. Some of the names that you'd see here generally have like a lot of properties. And similar to how Your.Rentals has a lot of properties. And essentially, it's about automating your prices and making sure that we're capturing those low demand days really well, and we're capturing the high demand days really well as well, right? So if we go to next screen, Andrew, like why Pricelabs, right? So Your.Rentals, you're already doing, you're already thinking about your pricing, right? You already probably had some format of pricing, but why Pricelabs within Your.Rentals, right? And why does it belong to that suite? Number one, like we leverage this very hyper local market data set, and we don't write it here, but like the AI technologies to come up with what should be the price recommendation for each day. And what I mean by that is your high demand days, again, you want to be one of the last ones to book. You want to keep a high price. If it's a low demand day, you want to be one of the first ones to book because you don't want to wait out and all the demand dissipate, right? So that's what we do. We help you maximize your revenue, right? So the rates, we're coming up with optimal rates. You're also automating your revenue strategy. You may want to maybe think about certain things, and like if you have a bunch of properties, it's hard to think about like how do I change and think about this revenue management on that. with Pricelabs and Your.Rentals, we've made this easy. And then, of course, Andrew potentially can touch on this, but it's like previously, like maybe you'd have to go to Pricelabs, and then you'd also have to go to Your.Rentals and maybe some other places. But this is like Your.Rentals key selling point here. Like they've done a fantastic job of bringing us into their platform and introducing this. So I don't know, Andrew, if you want to touch a little bit on that.
We'll definitely talk about it in a minute, Richie. It's, I think, part of the magic that we did together. So we will get to it. I think you've got one more slide here.
Very cool. I think I have three more.
Okay.
Not a bunch. But yeah, so how does this all work, right? When we are saying dynamic pricing, like we want to give you a sense of like what is really happening, right? Number one, we're scraping a bunch of data sources, right? We're getting data from Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, key data. We're building an events and holidays database that we get from third parties and also our internal. So there is all of this data that helps us understand what's happening in various markets, what are the key events in various markets, what are the key holidays in various markets. Maybe there's an F1 happening, maybe there's a concert happening. All of that we collect, right? Next is we run like processing. So we're roughly a team of 200 people. Of that, about 60 engineers, right? And we're working on making sure every day, like this is automated, but we process and remove a lot of bad data, right? So maybe people have blocks on their calendar. Maybe there are duplicate listings. Maybe there are listings that don't actually ever get booked, right? So we are processing all of that and cleaning that data from Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, etc., right? Then comes the core of Pricelabs, that step three, right? That's the artificial intelligence, where we look at everything that's happening in your hyperlocal market, right? So through the partnership with Your.Rentals, we get where your property is located, right? And as we know where that property is located, we look at what other properties are around it, what's happening with those properties. Are they getting booked? Are they not getting booked? What prices are they at? What is the market occupancy? Is the market occupancy, what was the market occupancy last year? Is it doing better this year? Is it doing worse that this year? So bunch of intelligence goes in, and we come up with a pricing recommendation. Now on top of that, then you help us with certain limits. You tell us, hey, understood, like there is like maybe I need to go lower than certain price, but maybe you like as an operator, you're like, I don't ever want to go below this price. I attract bad guests, or like not profitable for me, or like, there are multiple reasons, right? So you want to set that minimum price, and you can set this minimum price in Your.Rentals. Then you can also set a maximum price. Maximum price is again, generally we don't recommend, or minimum price we generally say you should set, right? Almost 100% of the times. Maximum price, we say it depends on like if some people like to set a maximum price, because what we are doing is we're doing unconstrained demand. So we're saying, hey, what is the maximum we can charge for a given day if it's a really busy day, right? But as an operator or as an owner, you may feel like, hey, if I'm charging that much, maybe some hosts may feel like, some guests may feel like they're not getting the value out of their property, etc., right? So you may want to set up maximum price thresholds. It's really dependent on users. I've worked with all kinds of clients. Some want to set a maximum price, some don't want to set a maximum price, right? And then ultimately, what happens is with all of this first four steps, right? Every day we are refreshing prices. We are sending that to Your.Rentals, and then Your.Rentals is taking that and sending it to whatever channels you're connected to via Your.Rentals, right? So that's the 5-step process, right? Um, Simpler on slide, has taken us 10 years to get to this step, right? Of what happens here, and we continue to improve every day. But once again, we collect all sorts of data sources, we clean them, we use artificial intelligence to come up with prices based on what has historically happened and what is happening in future, and we make some forecasts. We help you like allow you to set these minimum and maximum thresholds so that you can very easily control how low or how high your price can go. And then finally, every day we'll go in, we'll check what's happening in the market. Is it doing well, doing worse, right? And then update those prices back into Your.Rentals and through Your.Rentals into your channels.
Just interesting question on the events. This is something we get asked about sometimes. So let's say there's a Taylor Swift concert coming to town. I mean, this is a one night thing, right? And you're going to have a lot of people traveling for that. What do you see happen with pricing in that sort of?
Ooh.
Sorry.
So Taylor Swift concert. So there are two things that happen, right? In a concert like Taylor Swift. So one, today, Taylor Swift concert is a known entity, right? And then there is a Taylor Swift concert as an unknown entity. What I mean by that is today, I think everyone understands if there's a Taylor Swift concert, you should probably be increasing prices, right? Um, but I don't know if we know that for, say, a U2 concert or a Metallica concert, right? Should you be increasing prices? You don't know that, right?
Mm,
Right? So number one thing that happens is, let me start with the unknown entity of some concert. Should I be increasing prices? Should I not be increasing prices? Right. So what Pricelabs does is, one, we look at top artists around the world. So I'm talking about specifically concerts. Right? We look at top artists around the world. Where are they touring? Where are they doing shows? And so we're trying to put those in our calendars, right? Saying, hey, this artist is doing shows. Maybe it's like we're not seeing any demand for it yet, but we expect the demand to come in, right? So
mm-hmm.
that's one. Number two is, so based on that, based on knowing that artist or that those type of artists, we know, hey, generally we have seen prices go up or not change or whatever, right? So we are inputting that as a manual threshold in our pricing to saying,
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if it's Taylor Swift concert, I should at least increase my prices by 3x. So I've done that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then, as the dates get closer, then we are looking at what's happening in terms of demand, right?
Mm-hmm.
How is the demand evolving? Maybe the demand is not really there. Then we remove those thresholds and we start reducing prices slowly, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe the demand is really there, in which case either it's still threshold, or maybe we even go higher than threshold if the demand's like just through the roof, right? So it's that three-step process. We identify events, right? We add thresholds to them, and then also, like, based on what's happening in the market itself, automatically then either we start reducing or start increasing after that. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not as like that's maybe a bit more of a simple example, but we've seen, for example, around the Paris Olympics, some really weird behaviors in demand and supply, which we've validated with some of the OTAs as well. So that's a longer term sort of event. It's over 4 weeks, I guess. And then you've got people who travel from internationally, and they make a holiday around it and travel, not just visit Paris, but around the country as well. And I don't know if you have any data points on that, Richie, but it's also led to quite an oversupply. So a lot of people putting on short-term rental units just for the period in the hope of making some money, which of course makes it very difficult for a professional property manager or host to know what to do.
Absolutely, absolutely, right. So in that period, the supply can really go up, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it feels a little bit weird. Like, so happens for something like something like Olympics, right? May happen for Taylor Swift, not sure, but like there are certain events that, for example, say Tomorrowland, right? Or certain every year happening kind of things, right? Where people know and then they already plan for advance, right? They're like in Tomorrowland, they're like, okay, I know I need to give my, like, I'm probably going to travel during this time and give my home away, or maybe I'll allow people to put tents in my backyard or whatever, right?
yeah.
So yeah, like there is a sudden increase in supply that can happen, right? You're always thinking, oh, I should be pricing this, and there is nothing changing, right? But for certain unique periods, maybe there is suddenly a supply surge, right?
Mm, mm,
And so yes, now that gets confusing, right? There are two things that you have to think about there. One is, um, with the supply surge, like, will will I still get booked or not, right? Because maybe the the occupancy is going to increase and I'm going to get some demand into the market, extra demand, but the supply has like far outpaced what the demand was, right? And I
mm.
think maybe in Paris we're seeing some of that for Olympics. At least my insight on Paris is like a month old, but the hotels and the short-term rentals were not as booked as we had expected them to be.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because of a little bit of oversupply, right?
Mm.
The second thing that happens is people also start raising prices, and that deters maybe regular customers, right? So Paris, for example, will always have summer tourism, and there is Olympics tourism. Now, ideally, you'd expect summer tourism plus Olympics tourism, but if everyone's prices are super high, then summer tourism goes away, and just the Olympics tourism stays, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so like understanding that and reacting to that is what we do every day,
Yeah.
right? And um, I see one of the questions that Tatiana's asked, which is relevant, is how often are the OTAs scraped, right? So every second day, we are scraping the OTAs, Tatiana, right? Varies a little bit depending on the type of property, etc., right? But roughly every second day, we are getting this information and trying to make sense of what's happening in the market and how it's evolving.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Shall we? We'll leave the rest of the
Yes.
questions till the end, just so that we can really focus on that. Shall I go to the next slide here?
Absolutely. Yeah. So high level, what happens here, right? High level, what happens is we start off with a base price, right? Right. And now we're calculating the base price based on the prices that you already have in your rentals, right? So we're looking at what is it that you were charging already throughout the year, assuming that you already had a good sense of pricing, right? So we're looking at that, and then we're taking that, and on top of that, we are adding on what the market can do, right? We're adding on seasonality, like high season versus low season. We're adding on day of week, maybe weekends you can charge more, or weekdays you can charge more. How far out from the date that you are, you can book, right? What's happening hyper locally in your market? What's happening with your own property, right? Is it getting booked too much? Is it getting booked too little? Pacing, right? Last year, I expected summers to be very busy, right? I saw
Mhm.
summer was very busy, right? But this year, my summer is not really picking up. It's maybe slower, right? Um, or like my summer is like really, really doing well. So like I go back to that Paris example and say you have a property in Spain. The summer tourists from Paris are like, I can't go to Paris. It's going to be very busy. Maybe I should go to Spain. And suddenly maybe Spain sees a higher tourism, right? And so what
Mhm.
we'd see is like, oh, I'm just, don't quote me on that this is happening. I'm giving a hypothetical example. But then we'd see, oh, like Spain is starting to book up much faster, right? Then that means pacing, like it's doing better than last year. It could also do worse than last year, but it's doing better than last year. We need to consider that into what do we think the forecasted demand would look like. And based on that, what do we think we do a pricing on this?
Mhm. There's
Yeah.
one question. Maybe we take it right now because it
Yeah.
is topical for what we're talking about, and we get asked this a lot when people are first setting up the dynamic pricing. Is it possible? Thomas is asking: is it possible to set a minimum and max prices for certain periods differently, or why do we? And that's how we do it. Allow you to set it, as just one value, so not a different minimum per season as such, or different
Yeah.
maximum per season. Can you
Yeah.
explain
Yeah.
why we don't really need to do that?
Yeah. In so like essentially when you're thinking about min and max by season, you're in some ways thinking about um, you're trying to buy insurance to saying, hey, I want to make sure that the algorithm is not going too far low, right? Like ideally, we are optimizing for maybe we are optimizing for demand, and we're coming up with the right price point, right? So ideally, you don't need to worry about the low or high. Your low really is determined by at what point do you not make money, or it's not helpful for you, or you attract bad guests, right? And
Mhm.
high, again, like the quality of property, and you may feel like if I'm charging too much, I'm gouging people, right?
Yeah.
um so that's the reason why like just having one just works. Like Pricelabs is automatically fluctuating, and what we have seen though, sometimes people set say for a low season their or for a high season they set their minimum price too high, and then the demand is not there. COVID happens, very extreme example, right? But something happens and the demand is not there in a very hyper local setting, right? And then we can't go lower than that, right? So you really
Yeah.
want to set your business level goals, and then let Pricelabs fluctuate within that.
Yeah, and I think I understand why we get the question. People have been
Yeah.
doing seasonal pricing for years and decades in some cases, so it's a mentality shift in some way. And it's also a trust issue, right? If you've never
It's
tried it
trust.
before, you don't want to lose a year of revenue if suddenly you're getting priced too low. But what I can say is that, we're following some of the early adopters of Pricelabs, and some of the comments I do get are things like, "I'm surprised I can take that price at that time of the year." Now, of course, this is market driven, and it's I think you need to look at it at the revenue per unit across the year,
Yeah.
so across the seasons. That's what we're trying to help you maximize, not to get a 10% higher price for a week in August, but to make sure there's a really good balance of occupancy and the prices you're getting, so that you're over the full year, all seasons revenue is outpacing what you've been able to do before. Let's move along. There are some questions coming in, but we'll get to those at the end, I think, so we don't run out of time here. Shall I
Yeah.
hit the next one?
Yeah, let's go to the next one, right? Yeah, so this is like high level. I've already talked about this, right? But we're looking at how we are pricing your property compared to 350 other properties around it, right? We're also looking at in the graph below, we're seeing how this year is doing compared to last year, same time. So it's unclear, like not very obvious in the lower graph. But in the lower graph, I have three lines. I have the red line, which is this year's market occupancy, right? So if I'm looking at those 350 properties, how occupied are they, right? And then I have that darker gray line, right? Just, yeah, solid gray line, that one. And what that is saying is, as of today, so if I was sitting today on July 4th, and if I say wanted to look at August 10th in future, right? How occupied was my market as of July 4th on August 10th, right? So so you kind of know, oh, like, is the market today booking faster or slower, right? And then finally, you see the dotted gray line, that is like the final occupancy that the market achieved, right? And so sometimes as owners, we may see this market graph, and we look at that August number and we say, oh, market is only 20% occupied, like the August 4th number, right? Roughly it says I'm 20% occupied, and I'm like, oh my god, not getting a booking. I'm only 20% occupied, and I should have received a booking by now. But what this tells us is, hey, last year also roughly it was around, last year also at this time the market was only 20 to 23% occupied, but eventually it got to that 70-80% occupancy, right? And so this helps us figure out, forecast in a very simplistic way. It helps us figure out, okay, that's where finally the market will end up, right? Provided it continues to keep pace with last year. But then there's a lot more intelligence that goes behind it to figuring out what is actually happening. In a very similar way, the graph above, we're seeing, hey, the black line where your prices are but then the pink line, the dark pink line, the gray line is like where the rest of the market is at in groups, right? And so we're trying to see, hey, are we pricing you high on some days? Are we pricing you low on some days, right? And what we're really trying to do is we're trying to take that base price or the average price, and from there we're starting off, and we're adjusting your prices up and down.
I think it's just fascinating. Imagine having a team of people looking at this for you every day, and that's basically what we're doing, right? So
yeah, it's essentially like, at the end of the day, if you think about intelligence, right, artificial intelligence, it's in some ways what all of us intuitively know, but it's just really hard to calculate on a daily basis, right? And so that's what we do. We like intuitively what you already know, but we're just going there every day, coming up with intelligence, applying some complex math formulas to come up with price, right? What we don't do is we don't price match, right? So we're not trying to say, oh, if the competitor is charging this much, we should charge this much, right? And particularly relevant in our industry, because a lot of people don't price well. And so we don't want to price match against people who are not pricing well. What we're really trying to understand is what's happening in terms of demand, right? Having said that, if everyone in the market is increasing their prices and we're not seeing demand, we will still increase prices, because we don't know like what's happening, but everyone's increasing prices. We will follow that rat race, right? But if for whatever reason everyone keeps their prices high, but we don't see demand continue to evolve, we're going to drop those prices down, because like it doesn't make sense, right? So we don't fully price match to saying we're going to price against a competition. we try to understand what's happening in terms of demand, which is what you see in that lower graph. What's happening in terms of booking.
And I think, the way the industry changed since COVID with, a lot more flexible cancellation policies. That's one thing that on our side of the industry is a bit challenging to deal with, that you're getting cancellations with a full refund. That never used to happen, but now it does. So, I mean, it creates a lot more fluidity in the market. So it's not about, beating the market and charging the highest price, but you want to take the right price in the market so that also you're not going to get a cancellation because someone's actually found something cheaper that looks better value in the end. So, it's so complex, and I don't really understand how people are able to do this without the use of really good tech. All right. Shall we move to the next one? Well, I have. So
yes,
this I promise to keep fairly short, but just to kind of highlight what we've done here. And, I think we've done almost a world first. Probably I'm wrong, but it's there's certainly the way we've approached solving this problem and putting the power of Pricelabs into the hands of our customers. I think it's very innovative. So let me just take a few minutes how to explain how we've done it, and if you're one of our users or want to start using Your.Rentals, how you turn it on. First, our model is quite different to many PMS channel managers. We see ourselves, or we are, a true all-in-one platform. Our goal is that a host or a small business property manager doesn't need to build their own tech stack with multiple vendors. But having said that, have a look at the sophistication of Pricelabs. We're not going to build that ourselves. So our challenge is to bring that inside Your.Rentals. So you don't need to be creating your own setup with Pricelabs. You have a relationship with Pricelabs through Your.Rentals. So how have we done that? Well, it's quite simple. If you're an existing user, probably the easiest way to set it up is to go into calendar. If you're using us today, this is the multi-user calendar you see here. Just click on any date to expose the sidebar, which is the control panel for the calendar, and you'll see the dynamic pricing part there. Click on the Pricelabs, and it's as simple as what you see in the illustration here. Set a minimum rate, as Richie mentioned before. That is important. It provides guidance as to how low you can go. And if you want, set a maximum rate. There were some good reasons. We'll come back to that a bit later as well. And essentially, then your dynamic pricing is turned on. So you don't need to map listings. You don't need to choose a subscription type or anything. It's included in your fee from Your.Rentals. So it's actually free in terms of what you pay today to activate this and turn it on. You can always turn it off as well, but we hope that you will never need to or want to do that. And then a couple of other places you will see it. So in the listing builder, where you would normally set up your rates. So we of course have basic rates and seasonal rates. Well, you still will set those because these are the guidance that Richard was talking about, that we want to know how you would set your rates or how you've done it before. But once you've switched to dynamic pricing, then you'll see it here, right? So then you can click the link to go back to the dynamic pricing setup. And you can always see and check in the calendar the nightly rates that have been applied to your listings. So of course, people will be curious and want to track that. You can go and just check that. And as Richie said, we update the rates on a daily basis. And then secondly, if you feel like you can beat the AI and the algorithms, which sometimes you probably will be able to if you have forewarning of that Taylor Swift concert or something else happening, you can override the dynamic pricing rates with custom rates. So you can see that highlighted in the same calendar toolbar. So anytime you want to change the pricing, increase, decrease, you're free to do that, and we'll push the price that you set to the channels. So in that sense, I think it's pretty simple. Most of the questions are answered. I'll just skip ahead in the help guide, so you can read about what is dynamic pricing. So a lot of the questions we'll cover today answered there, and also how to set it up. And of course, that's available in English, German, Spanish, French, and Italian. And then finally, just a point that the dynamic pricing's added individually per listing. So you will need to go through and activate it for each listing that you have. If you are one of the customers with a multi-unit property setup, it's best that you contact your customer success manager for a bit of assistance setting it up, because it's slightly more tricky in that setup. But if you've just got single units, then you just do exactly what I've showed you to do today. So we've noticed some customers trying it on some of their listings and not others. That's of course solves the curiosity question of what happens when I click this button. But of course, you will need to remember to go back and activate it for the others. And we can also help you, analyze how the booking patterns look like between your dynamic pricing listings and the ones you've manually set pricing for. So yeah, there's something from our marketing team. Get more bookings with dynamic pricing. I mean, it's a bit more complex than that. We want to help you generate the maximum revenue over the year from the investments you manage for other people or your own investments. So that's the way I'd be looking at it. It's a long-term thing. It's not just something to set for a few weeks in summer to try and beat the market with a higher price. All right, then I think we've got plenty of time for Q&A, and we might even finish up a bit earlier. There are some questions in the Q&A. If you've got some, please feel free to enter them, but we'll just answer some common questions first, and then we'll get to the questions that you guys have posted. So one that we get asked all the time, Richie, is, I think I'm okay at pricing. Actually, people quite often don't know how good they are or how bad they are at pricing. But if I'm okay at it, if I'm an average manual pricer, how much additional revenue might I expect by using dynamic pricing?
Yeah. The answer is it depends, right? But the range that we typically see is somewhere around 20% to 30%. If you've not really done a lot with your pricing, right? If you're just like flat price, you've not done much, you maybe do a little bit of tweaks here and there, right? We roughly see somewhere between somewhere around 20%, right, or 30%. If you are someone who's like very actively involved in it, right? Maybe that number is 5 to 10%. Generally, it's a rarity where we see people who don't see additional revenues, right? It may look like a little bit different behavior than you're used to, because maybe you're used to getting a booking for summer in last year October, right? And we may not want to do that, because we may want to keep out our booking windows slightly more closer so that we can command higher premiums, right? So there may be a difference in how Pricelabs eventually will get you that pickup, right? But generally we see increase. I would say it ranges from that 5% to 30%, depending on how much you are doing in terms of pricing.
What if I'm bad at pricing?
Oh, I've seen like if you like if you're bad at pricing, if you like there are examples where we know people have made 200%, 300% more with Pricelabs on the first year, right? But that seems like almost a wrong example to quote, right?
Of course, yeah.
We've like, I know property managers in Southern Europe who like have like doubled their revenues in a year, right? But that's just like that's a very bad example to quote, right?
Of course, yeah.
You should not be expecting that. Yeah.
Well, then that's the answer. So if you're seeing double the revenue after having this on, then you were probably bad at it before. But that's okay. I mean, look, the role of a property manager or a host is so broad. You're doing everything from, if you're a property manager, contracting and doing all the owner relations, maintenance, guest support, check-in, all the hospitality side, managing cleaning, just trying to get that 5-star review. There's so much to be good at that, we're human. You can't be good at everything. So if we've got good solutions to help you by automating things, then by all means use them and focus on the bits that you love doing. All right, and a question I'm curious about, we're going into summer here. Some would say we're already in it, but not here. How could dynamic pricing help me during the coming summer period? What sort of challenges might it solve for a property manager?
Yeah, two things. Again, right? Say if you're not, if your market is behind compared to last year, right? And you've not realized that yet, right? You're still thinking it's the same market. Last year I was able to generate some revenue, but this year, like, you don't realize it, but the market is pacing behind, right? And market is not doing as well, right?
Mhm.
So very simply, because we're talking about like summer period, which is like just here, already here, right? It's one, the value is we're going to decrease prices if the market is pacing behind on certain days, right? And so that's number one, right? Like that's the immediate impact that you may see, right? You may see us reducing prices on some dates, right? Maybe not just on, maybe not all through your summer periods, but maybe in nearby dates, maybe on dates that like weekdays, you may see that. That's number one impact. Number two, even during that summer period, you may not have considered some very high demand summer weekends, right? Or summer
Mhm.
weeks or whatever that is, right? And maybe you're still not booked, right? And for whatever reason you're not booked, and we may increase prices for that and capture additional revenue for those, right?
Mm.
So it can happen on both sides. I
Mhm.
think uh, like if I think of summer period now, July itself, I think it'll be a little bit more about capturing the lower end of the revenue, right? And
Mhm.
pricing yourself right in the market that is remaining, right?
Mhm.
Versus trying to keep high, but or versus trying to keep wherever. Number two, on the other end is like say maybe August and September, which is still good 30, 60 days away, right? And so as I think about that, we can still right price ourselves and get maybe higher revenues somewhere, higher daily rates somewhere, right?
Yeah. Can I ask about like two sort of things that fundamentally changed over the last 5 to 10 years
Yes.
that we recommend to our customers? Because if you don't do it, then you're also limiting your opportunities. One is giving guests a choice of free versus non-refundable cancellation rates. Now, the flip side of that, so it does increase your we're actually pushing 30-40% of our bookings now are non-refundable because we've had a lot of our customers understand locking in revenue further out on non-refundable policies. But where you have these free cancellation bookings that do get cancelled 7, 10, 14 days out, is that something that by having dynamic pricing turned on, you can maybe more easily get that period rebooked in the short term?
Absolutely right. Because say, just making this up, right? Like say maybe you had the pricing at 300 or 400 previously, right? Say
Mm-hmm.
I'm just making this up. It was at 300 for a weekend that is 2 weeks out from now, right? And I had my pricing at 300. Someone cancels it, that we can still say it's at 300, right? Now, from what we see, there is very little demand that is left to come in for that weekend, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we might say 300 does not make sense. We're actually going to drop down to 200, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or the reverse is also true. You've taken a
Yeah.
booking at 300 and there's a cancellation that's come through. And we realize, oh, wait, like there is a lot more demand. And maybe you're undercharged for that weekend already, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes like so that cancellations can also be a good thing.
Good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes, right? Not always, but some particularly for high demand dates, sometimes they can be good. Especially
Yeah.
if you're mispriced yourself early on.
Yeah. The other trend I think that maybe this helps as well is, if I look back 10 years ago, and I know some property managers still do this in their peak season today, they say, okay, if you want to book my property, I set my prices a long way out, but you must book 7 night blocks, like weekly blocks, change over on Saturday. That used to be very, very common. But as online bookings have taken hold, and a lot of the other changes that we've seen, then you kind of need to have a lot more flexibility, even in your high season, to offer 1 night bookings. So that leaves quite a lot of odd gaps in the calendar. Do you see more of that yourself? And how do you think having a dynamic pricing can help fill those little gaps?
Yeah. So again, if you have gaps on your calendar, we look at the ability to book for those gaps, right? And if we feel like, hey, again, we may reduce prices for, generally if it's gaps, we do reduce prices, right? If it's like small gaps on your calendar, maybe 2 days, 3 days, and you typically take longer bookings, right? Or if you typically take 3-day bookings and we see a 2-day gap, we tend to drop prices for those because the probability of booking in a gap reduces. And so we do tend to try to drive, because so one thing that I do want to drive is dynamic pricing is not just about increasing rates. I think a lot of people
Yeah.
consider dynamic pricing as increasing rates. It's about trying to maximize your ability to capture revenue and get a booking, right? Now, on a high demand day, we'd keep our rates high and we'd increase, right? But if it's things like, Andrew, like you said, it's a gap, I'll potentially decrease my rates unless there is something going on that gap, right? Unless again Taylor Swift in there, then I would not reduce my rates, right? But if it's nothing's going on, we want to capture a booking rather than let that like we're not selling laptops or mobile phones here that if I don't sell it today, I can still sell it tomorrow, right? Because we're selling room nights. If I don't sell that room night, we've not sold it, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah. So we'll on that gaps we'll try to capture revenue.
Yeah. All right. Good. Interesting. Another thing, it's actually not a question I asked, but I think it's fascinating. You touched on it a bit earlier, but when we caught up, this was one thing I learned, that when you start, shift from manual pricing, the way you've done it before, to dynamic pricing, some things change, and you should be aware of that. It might be a bit scary at times, or surprising at other times. What are some of those things you should look out for and think, okay, that's normal?
One, you'd probably see wild swings on your calendar sometimes, right? And you may be used to seeing $200 every night, and you might see us saying, "Oh, weekdays is 150, and the weekends is like 300," right? And so you're like, "What's going on?" So number one, do note that like you'd see variance on the calendar, but also know that the guest does not see that kind of variance, right? Guest sees a price quote, right? And so they search for rates and they see a price quote. They don't see, oh, Andrew is trying to charge 150 on the weekends and 300 on the weekdays, and I should try to and maybe some channels maybe show that, and if they show that, like it's like everyone's used to dynamic pricing at this point, airlines, etc. Right? So that's number one change. You'd see these changes in your calendar, right? Number two, you might see some rates that are either shockingly high or low. Again, keep your minimum price, right? But either shockingly high or low. If it's shockingly high, generally there's an event that's happening in your market, right? Or something. Number three, you'd see, depending on what your pricing philosophy before was, right? What's bunch of people sometimes end up seeing is that their booking window with Pricelab shifts a little, right? Because like when we are trying to charge higher, that means we'd not be the first ones to book. We may be a little bit later to book, right? And so maybe you're used to getting a booking 9 months in advance, right? But with Pricelabs, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 5 months, maybe it's 4 months, right? So you'd see that happen a little bit, right? So that those are the differences that I would say you may expect.
Okay, super helpful, because it is a little step into the unknown, so it's good to know what to expect. Should I set custom rates myself for holidays? I think we talked about this quite a lot. Of course, you can always override what Pricelabs suggests, but they are considering events, and of course, holidays like Christmas and Easter and holidays in other parts of the world are all considered in the model, right? How should I set my minimum rate? We get asked this all the time. Like, what should my minimum rate be? How would you answer that?
This is a tough one, right? Ideally, your minimum rate is the rate that you are willing to take, below which you're like, I'm going to walk away from this deal, right? I don't want this deal, right? So that's your minimum rate. Now that might be determined by your mortgage, might be determined by how you maintain, what kind of maintenance your property needs, etc. Right? If you're unsure, at least from a dynamic pricing perspective, what I tell folks is whatever on average you were charging, at least give the algorithm about 30, 40% room to go below if you can.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So that like if it's a really down market, or like at least I like 30, 40. Generally we say 25%, right? But like give that kind of room so that we can go lower or go higher.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the what do I get out of bed for, to open the door for the guest. I mean, of course, that is not the goal to charge that, but we need to know the minimum, right? Otherwise, you might not get out of bed or not feel very grumpy getting out of bed. This one has been posted also in the Q&A. So why can't I set, and the limitation is that Your.Rentals, when you set it up in Your.Rentals, you set a minimum rate which applies to the whole year. So and Miguel in the Q&A is asking, so should I just get rid of seasons and let dynamic pricing take over? Maybe those two things are quite related. We've kind of touched on it, but do you want to give it one more go?
Yeah, I think so, yes, right. Like that we will like you should, like, unless there is a real reason where you want to keep different minimum rates, right? Look at the prices that we're recommending, see if it works, right? See if it's not dramatically lower, then you can make that choice, right? But I would say yes, you want to turn off the different season minimum rates.
Yeah. So in fact, maybe the mental leap for people that have never tried this before is what you were doing before by defining seasonal pricing, weeknights and weekend rates, all of these type of manual settings was a very poor version of doing what dynamic pricing should actually do. Because when you're doing the manual rates, you're thinking, okay, I know the high season when people traveling, so that's actually what you were doing before. And Pricelabs actually does that, but it's taking all the market data into account on a daily basis, right? So it's another level of sophistication. So yes, it seems weird, but you should ditch the idea of seasonality because it's all baked into the model. Okay, and we've answered this one. How often are the rates updated? I mean, you guys are scraping every couple of days. Depends a bit on the channels you said before.
Every 24 hours.
Yeah, every 24 hours. And then we are syncing, I think, twice per day with Pricelabs and then pushing a daily update to OTA. So if you were doing that sort of schedule yourself with your analysis before, good luck to you, because that's probably all you were doing. So we've got you covered there. Let's just have a look. We've got 10 minutes here if we need them, but we can start with Diana, who asks, properties in the neighborhood may offer different levels of or different luxury. So you've got basic and you've got luxury and everything in between. How do you compare with other rentals according to the one that you have?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, we're looking at the size of your property, right? We're immediately looking at the size of your property. That's the first most impactful metric that we see, which is the number of bedrooms, bathrooms that you have, right? Like, is it 3 bedroom versus 1 bedroom versus a studio versus whatever, right? And so we're immediately comparing for that, right? Number two, we're looking at what you were already pricing at and what behaviors were you already seeing on that account, right? Were you pricing yourself and were you getting booked already? Were you not getting booked already? Based on that, we'd say, hey, we need to be a little bit lower or a little bit higher. What we will not do is a dramatic difference. What I mean by that is, if you thought your property should be $600 a night, or 600 euros a night, but you were only charging 200 euros, we'd imagine that you really think it's a 200 euros a night property, right? Now, in the course of couple of seasons here, we may realize, hey, look, Diana, your property gets booked really fast. We actually need to move that from 200 kind of a price to really keep on moving up, right? So we may realize that a little bit later, right? But we're relying on your bedroom size as an understanding of what's happening in your market. We're relying on hyper locally where your property is located to understand what's happening in that specific region, right? And then we're relying on your price to understand what do you think your property was like, right? So we're relying on those three factors. And then there are additional factors that we layer in. Like, yes, maybe you have certain kinds of amenities, right? Maybe you have a pool, or maybe you have something that we'd layer on to understand what you're trying to do, right? But like the biggest impact that something has is got to do with your bedroom size, followed by your booking patterns, followed by your prices that you had, and then
Mhm.
every other amenity that follows, right? Including, I think I saw
Yeah.
someone say um, review scores, right? So yeah, so like if you're in the past, we'd seen review scores not having a lot of impact on bookability compared to what a lot of hosts believe, right?
Okay.
Like between because in the past, the particularly on Airbnb, for example, right? The delta between a good and a bad score was like very hard to distinguish. Everyone was 4.5 and above, right? And some were
Mhm.
super hosts, right? But now we're starting to see guests get give real review scores, right? Like some goes down to like even 3, 4, whatever, right? And so we're starting to see that delta shape up, and so people now starting to think about, yes, I need to impact that. That's something that we're building to. We don't have that today actively in our algorithm,
Okay.
and we're building to, because in the past it did not have an impact, and we're now starting to see the impact.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I mean, it's also, there's so many factors, right? I mean, a bad review score can also be based on a disconnect that I feel like I paid too high a price for what I got. Of course, there's a lot of other issues that people react badly to. Poor cleaning, of course, is probably the top one. But it is all related. I'm thinking also that with the real advent of AI and your application of it, you don't need to input like a million parameters to get a good algorithm. It's going to learn based on what happens with the property over time and how high a price you can take and other things.
Yeah.
So it's
The biggest
different
learning
world
that
than
we're seeing is like, what are you getting bookings or not, right?
yeah, yeah. Good. And there's one more from Jinky. Do I need to change my dynamic pricing if I don't receive bookings? Look, I think I know what your question says. If you're using dynamic pricing, if you turn on Pricelabs and you've got things set up well and you're not receiving bookings, there's probably something else wrong. Um, it's not, I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but there's probably something else wrong. And what I would recommend, Jinky, is reach out to our support team, or if you're a property manager, to your customer success manager, because it can be other things that are impacting the bookability of your listing. Pricing is only one thing, right? It's one of the major determinants when people are making their choice of what to book, but there can be other factors at play as well. So reach out to us. Our team is very good at investigating why that might be, and hopefully you have a good property in a good high demand area, and we'll get that fixed pretty quickly. One more from Christina just popped in. Why do you have a very high far out increment on price, even if I follow approximately base price recommendation from you? For example, you recommend 200 on a low demand month, but as far out as I see on the calendar recommendation, over 360. Even without having sales, you do not go down with the price. It's a very specific example, but
Yeah. So like far out, we generally 360 is too high, right? Please do reach out to Your.Rentals team, and we'd figure out, right? But like generally we're far out. We're trying to keep prices high because we don't, like I've always mentioned, we don't want to be the first ones to book, right? We want to figure out what's happening in the market before we make a call, right? So like if even though it's a low season, unless it's like an absolutely dead low season where no bookings come in, right? There is some percentage of bookings that are going to come in, right? And we want to understand what percentage of the bookings are coming in before we start adapting to, right? And we keep far out prices because we increase far out prices with an understanding of, in this market, usually bookings come in within the last 3 months, right? Or within the last 4 months, right? So then outside of those 4 months or 5 months, we'd keep our price a little bit higher, because you don't want to be the first ones to book in that market, right? So
mhm.
that's our philosophy, right? But yes, feel free to reach out, and we can also chat about it.
Yeah. And I mean, if anyone's booked airline tickets, I booked tickets to Australia to go and visit the family for Christmas, and the day they released the tickets, they were sky high, and I waited and waited until it came down a little bit. Now they're back up again. So, it's market driven, and you want to make sure that you're really optimizing the price you take for the booking when you get it. All right. I don't think there's any more questions, but there's some really good questions there. Thank you so much for your questions. Yinki will reach out to you after and answer that question. It's a little bit more specific. Richie, fantastic to have you join me today. We love working with you guys. I get so many comments from our product and engineering teams of how good guys you are to work with. So we're really looking forward to build this bigger and stronger and have lots of our customers relying on Pricelabs for their pricing.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much for the partnership, Andrew, and to everyone on this webinar. Thank you for the partnership and looking forward to doing more.
Great. All right. But thanks to everyone who joined today. There will be a recording we'll send out to those that registered. And if you wait, you'll be able to get one with subtitles if you prefer to hear it or read it in your own language. So thanks once again, Richie. Thanks for everyone that pulled this together. And stay tuned. Have a great summer, everybody. I hope it's very successful for you all. Bye for now.
Bye.